introduce to you Professor Ming Wong, who will give our first lecture today on how to write a paper. Are you going to share your...
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So as editor-in-chief...
Shall I do it now? Shall I do it? Okay.
Yeah, if you share it. So,
okay.
So as editor-in-chief for Environmental Geochemistry and Health, he'll give us his experience on what must be many thousands of papers that have passed through your desk.
Oh, not how to do it. Okay. Oh dear. Oh, got some problem.
Okay. There we go. We can see it.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can you see the screen?
Very clear.
Oh, okay. Is it big enough?
Are you
Is
able
it
to...
the right size? Oh, okay.
Can you expand it wider?
Okay. I don't know how to do it though. Like this? Oh,
fantastic. Yeah.
Green.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, good. Is it good?
Good.
Okay. Shall I start?
Yes, please.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank Michael and the Society for giving me this chance. I'm really honored, and it's also my pleasure to give this talk. I've known Michael for a few years, and this is the first time we met online. This is really great. Now, my talk would be more focused on environmental science, which would be a bit different from the last speaker, Mohammed. He focused on chemistry, bit of physical science, and so on. First of all, I would like to indicate that the information contained in my talk would be from different sources, from myself as well as other sources. Oops. Oops. Okay, getting used to it. So, table of contents. First of all, I would give a brief introduction, and then we'll talk briefly about different parts of the paper, purposes, and how to write them very briefly. And then we go on to look at the journals around. When you want to choose a journal, what are the common criteria for choosing journal, submission, reviewing processes, revision, and so on. But I would also like to talk about ethical issues. I think these are very important nowadays, because if you are not informed about all these ethical issues, you might infringe into certain acts which are not supposed to be normal. Oops. My relevant experience, I don't want to show how good I am. The aim of this talk is to share with you my experience, the mistakes I made in the past, so you don't have to repeat the mistakes I made. So these are some data about my publications and my education and so on. I have supervised about 70 master and PhD students, and I'm really grateful for them. I learned from them because they sort of acting as my mycelium, sourcing for nutrients and water, and I get a lot of information from them, and then in the end we publish papers, and we are very happy. So different parts of the paper. Now, I'm sure you know about all the different parts. I'm not going to repeat them, but I would like to emphasize that each section would have a clearly defined purpose, and different journals, they have different requirements. So the best thing to do is to look at the website of the journal if you intend to submit your papers to. And to start with, I think you should have good versions of all the figures and tables, and then write in the following order. I think it would be easier if you start from writing methods, results, discussion, and then introduction and abstract, because abstract is the mini paper, the skeleton of your paper. I think you need to know all the information before you can write the abstract. Now, preparing a title, I think is also important, because a good title can tell people about the main findings of the research. So it should be specific, concise, complete, so you can attract more readers. So a good title should contain the fewest possible words that adequately reflect the contents of a paper. So it should be meaningful, specific, but not too long. So a title can be a phrase, it can be a complete sentence. So try to omit all these excessive words. Studies on, observation on, investigations on, I don't think these are necessary. So an example is given here. Interaction of symbiotic microbes with their host plants. I think the first three words could be omitted. Now, sometimes you may have a big project, and then you publish more than one papers under this project. You may use subtitle. So this is an example here. Role of mycorrhizae associated with vetiver grown in lead zinc contaminated soil. The first one could be field study. Second one would be greenhouse study. Third one would be physiological study, and so on. Now, I think it would be important to make the titles more attractive. I'm citing some of my examples. So the title here, the first one, Export of Toxic Chemicals, a review of the case of uncontrolled e-waste recycling. The journal is published, a year published, and then total citation. So the second one, it's also e-waste. I took part in a project supported by Hong Kong government and also the Chinese government, looking at the health effects of e-waste. So we've been working on that and published a few papers. So these are some example. Number 4, ecological restoration of mine degraded soil with emphasis on metal contaminated soil. So try to make your title simple and attractive. But however, the last one, shark fin, a symbol of wealth and good fortune, may pose health risk. It sounds sexy. We thought it's a sexy title, but somehow it doesn't attract too many citations. But perhaps not too many people working on mercury in sharks. People always ask me, are review papers can attract more citations? I think you may agree with me. The answer is yes. And according to our experience, we try to review the chemicals, toxic chemicals, and also emerging chemicals of concern. Now, these chemicals, we have been using them for quite some time, and only recently we found out they are not so safe. So these are new sort of emerging topics. So it seemed to attract quite a bit of citations. So the first one is bisphenol A, e-waste management. Third one, pharmaceuticals, personal care products in China. And fourth one, the fourth to seventh one are our recent review papers. So we have to wait and see whether they can attract citations. But recently, I spent more time on working on review papers because I'm approached the semi-retirement age. So I don't have my research assistants, my postgraduate students doing the work. So recently, the past 3 or 4 years, I try to write a few review papers. Now, abstract. Oops. Now, keywords would be important. Have we talked about abstract yet? Okay, it seems in the wrong order. Very often we are asked to provide 3 to 5 keywords and short phrases. They are required for indexing. So they are also important because you provide the keywords which reflect the contents of your paper. So people checking your keywords and find the paper which are relevant to your study. So it would be good if you try to use those keywords which are not repeated in the title. I think that would enhance the chance of people citing of your paper. Okay, so the first one, variation in arsenic, lead and zinc tolerance and accumulation in 6 population of Pteris fatata from China. Now, this particular fern is an arsenic hyperaccumulator. So in your keywords, you try to avoid those words which are already there in the title. So Chinese brick fern is an English name, common name. Pteris semipinnata, because it's another species in the same genus we want to compare. Heavy metal tolerance, accumulation, and then intra-specific variation, because you're trying to compare the 2 species. So second example, comparison of aluminium levels in tea plants from Hong Kong markets and in varieties of tea plants from Hong Kong and India. So it just happened at that time, I had an Indian girl who worked with me for her PhD. So she went home every summer and she collected all these samples, and both China and India are the 2 countries which produce a lot of tea. So in the keywords, we try to avoid those words already in the title. So we use Camellia sinensis, Latin name for tea, infusion, the way you make tea, aluminium, well, it's repeated, I think, Alzheimer's disease. Now why Alzheimer's disease? Because at that time, it was 15 years ago, I think. So people worried if you have too much aluminium in your body, the aluminium might go to your brain, and then you may have Alzheimer's disease. So we had that. We had a paragraph for discussion, and then Tie Guan Yin. I think it's a bit strange to you. It's a brand of tea very popular in the southern part of China is a semi-fermented tea, okay? So highlights. Now, nowadays, there are lots of journals would like to have highlights of your research work. So example given here about the health risk assessment, exposure to PBDE, flame retardant, in Guangzhou and Hong Kong, the two big cities in the southern part of China. So in the highlights, we try to put down the significant findings, like the PM 2.5 accumulated the highest concentration, dust ingestion was the main exposure route for toddlers and so on, some major findings. Now, authorship. Multi-authorship is very common in the past, say 40, 50 years ago. And people try to put the order of the author according to the alphabetical order of the surname. So Wong would not be very good. It would be the very end author. So nowadays, multi-authorship is very common, especially for science, for technological topics, and so on. So authors should contribute to certain parts of the paper, like design, exercise, analysis, writing, and so on, to be qualified as a co-author. So it would not be very good if you put a person down as a co-author because he or she is a girlfriend or boyfriend. I don't think this would be a very good idea. So all the authors, I think they should read and approve the final version of the paper before submission. So there may be official complaints and so on. I think we should avoid this as much as possible. Well, how to list authors? We talk about this already, but nowadays we usually put our postgraduate student as the first author, and the supervisor would be listed as a correspondent author. So when you list the name, I think it would be very important. You should be consistent. Once you use it, you should use it for the whole life. I have made my mistakes. I use M.H. Wong, I use Ming Wong, and Ming Hong with a hyphen, and also Ming Hong joined together, and M.H. Wong. I have a lot of problem. So my advice is to think about it and use the same name throughout your entire academic life, okay? So I have my friends here, Alan J. M. Baker, A.J. M. Baker, John P. Giese, J.P. Giese, and so on. I'm sure they also use different versions of the name. So my advice is be consistent. Well, address, I'm sure you know, it's very important because the work belongs to the institution where it was performed. You ought to list out all the department, institution, postal code, and so on. Now, if an author has moved by the time of publication, I think you should put down present address as a footnote. Oh, okay, we come to abstract. Now, abstract, it would be a mini version, or you can call it skeleton of your paper. Now, usually a very short paragraph, less than 2 250 words. Certain journals are very fussy about the number of words, like environmental pollution, and they will return the abstract to you. Sorry, your abstract is 251 words. Can you omit one word? This sort of thing. So within one short paragraph, I think we should summarize the objective or scope of the paper, the methods you use very briefly, the major trends of the results, conclusion or concluding remarks, 1 or 2 sentences, and significance of the research. So the main purpose, main purpose of abstract is to enable readers to identify the basic content of a paper rapidly, and then decide whether you want to get hold of the full paper. Now, as an editor, I think we use the abstracts to screen the papers for review, and then you have to choose the handling editors. Who are the relevant editors you want to ask for help? And in addition, the perspective, sorry, no problem. Okay, shall I go on? Shall I go on?
Sorry, I think somebody just had themselves off mute. We've muted them.
Okay, no problem. I need to go a bit faster, I think. So the abstract also serve the purpose of potential reviewers when they are asked to review the paper, and they will look at the abstract to see whether they are interested in the topic, whether they are competent in reviewing the paper. So writing the abstract, I think we should answer 3 questions. Why did you study it? How did you study it? What did you find? And what does it mean? So the basic contents will include 1 or 2 sentences about the principal objective and the scope of your investigation, the method you use. For example, you use ICP, MS to analyze heavy metals and so on, summarize the results, the major trends, and then state the principal conclusion. So it's a short paragraph. It should be specific, concise, and stand alone from the rest of the paper. So an example here, I'm not going to go through it in details. A paper we published 15 years ago, I think, in EST, Environmental Science and Technology, about electronic waste. We were one of the early groups working on the health effects of electronic waste. So these e-waste papers tend to attract a bit of information, citation, as I mentioned before. So, so if you dissect the abstract, you will see different sentences which try to answer different questions, like principles, objective, what did you do, what method did you use, major implications, future prospects, and principal conclusion. I'm not going to talk about it in details. Now, past few years, I think it only started about 4 or 5 years ago. The certain journals want you to provide graphical abstract. I'm not an expert on that. I'm sure you have you can learn how to do it of all these graphical abstract. Now, introduction. The introduction is important because it provides the necessary background to put your work into context. And it should be clear from the introduction why the current work was performed, your aims and significance, what has been done before. So a bit of literature review you should do, how your paper would add to your knowledge, not just only an exercise of writing a paper. I think that's important. So for introduction, there are things you should do and things you should not do. The things you should do here, consult the guide of authors, because each journal, they have their own guidelines. Set the scene and outline the problem and hypothesis, ensure the literature cited is balanced, up to date. I think it's important to cite all these updated and relevant references, because we are not writing a historical papers. I think we are writing a scientific paper. And then define any non-standard abbreviation and jargon in the introduction. So things you should not do. Try not to write an extensive review. Well, unless it's a review paper, right? Try not to cite too much of your own work, and then work that supports your findings while ignoring contradictory studies or work by competitors. Describe the methods only briefly, and then writing the introduction. So basically, it covers three major parts: the general background, the previous findings by other people, your experiment, examining the questions addressed. So these are the essential contents: the nature and scope of problem you want to study, review literature, include a hypothesis, and state specific objectives. I think it would be a good idea to itemize your objectives and then state very simple method of your investigation. Materials and methods for experimental procedures, I think we should describe how, when, where, and what you did. So you can you should give details so competent worker can repeat your experiments. For the materials and methods, I think we should state all the controls, all the treatments. I think replicates, enough replicates would be very important. State the QA/QC for chemical analysis, the standard reference materials, and code number you use, where they obtain blank samples, and so on. Now, when you use hazardous materials and dangerous methods, I think you should take down the necessary precautions. Now, if the experiments dealt with animal with backbone, well, including human beings, I think we should seek the approval for ethical committee. I think this is very important. For experiments dealing with living organisms, because nowadays, environmental science, we often have to deal with plants and animals. I think for plants and animals, one thing is important. I think you should provide common name as well as a Latin name, genus, species, and sometimes even strain and cultivar of the particular organisms. I think we ought to describe the characteristics, the age, and the source of all these organisms. Where do you obtain the plants or animals? Growth conditions will also be important. Chemicals you use, lightening, lighting, temperature, diet, apparatuses, and so on. Now, for environmental science, very often we have to conduct some ecological experiments. I think the best thing to do is to provide a map or a photograph showing the sampling locations, the places where you collect the samples, the pre-treatment, and so on. Now, very often we have to conduct some plant trials. We should tell people about your random block design, the environmental conditions, temperature, relative humidity, light intensity, light dark cycle, and so on. Not only these conditions, but we also should talk about the water regime, the nutrient solution you use, the growth substrate, and pot size, number of replicates, and so on. So very often people forget about pot size. Now, for published methods, you don't have to repeat all the procedures in detail unless you have modified the method. Then you should clearly indicate which parts have been modified. So, unless the paper is trying to develop a method like chemical analysis kind of paper, so you should precisely describe the measurement and analysis. Well, use ordinary statistical methods. Nowadays, you are really lucky. You can make use of all these packages. Whereas when I did my PhD, I still remember Durham, in northern part of England. At that time, we had to rely on a calculator on these calculations, and you do it 10 times. They are all different. The results are different. So nowadays, you are really very lucky. So level of significance, I think you should clearly indicate. For better organization, very often we can use subtitles for better organization. For example, the organisms use chemical solution, microscopy, and so on. Now, results. Results obviously are very important because the entire paper would stand on the results section. But the results section usually simple and direct. So you only present the data you obtain from the present study and try not to make any comparison with data in other papers. So in the results section, there should not be any discussion included in the section. The best thing to do is to use figures and tables to support generalization about the data you obtain. And try to avoid redundancy, to avoid repetition of the same data which are presented in both tables and figures. Do not describe the data in detail in the text because they have been presented in a table or figure. And the idea of the results section is to guide the reader and points to trends and patterns, because results are important because they support conclusions which are drawn from numerical data with, so we only include brief statements of the statistical criteria you use. So things you should do: use figures and tables to summarize data, include enough statistical analysis to persuade the reader. Okay, be sure text, figures, and tables are consistent with one another. there are papers when we read the text, when you try to look at the figures and the tables, they do not match. So this is important. Now, emphasize only important observations that will answer the question or solve the problem which raised in your introduction. So you can be selective about your results. Things you should not do, you should not include discussion in introduction in the section. You should not repeat materials which is already in the method section. You should not repeat the legends, the figures, or the titles of the tables in the text, and you should not repeat the data already presented in the titles and in the figures and tables. Writing the results, I'm not going to go through this. I'll skip some of the slides because of the interest of time. Now, figures and tables are effective, but neatness counts. So figures should look pretty. They should look standardized. They should look nice. So you need to design them carefully. And as a general rule, the figure should be deleted if it can be replaced with 1 or 2 sentences in the text and a few numbers. So sometimes we see too many figures and too many tables in one paper, and very often we suggest the authors to combine or delete some of the less important figures and tables. And of course, nowadays we have supplementary materials where you can put your raw data, sort of raw data in the section. 5 rules for making, I only got 4 here, for making figures. So design the figures carefully, uniformly, same font size, no unnecessary text in the figure. The best thing to do, if a colleague, show it to your colleague. If he or she cannot understand, so you probably need to redesign. So this is a good practice. Oops. So there are some examples. Again, I'm not going to repeat them. Now, discussion. We should tell readers what results mean and why they are important. The primary purpose is to indicate relationship among the observed facts. So you have to explain your results relative to the objectives you put down in the introduction. Is there any evidence in your data to support the hypothesis you tested? Why or why not? Now, quote relevant references throughout the discussion is important. Try to avoid old references. And I think it's also important, try not to quote too many references in one statement. I think 3 would be more than enough. End of discussion would be concluding remarks, unless you have a separate conclusion to talk about the significance of the work, which is based on the results you obtain, whether or not the data supports or disproves the hypothesis you put down, and the future perspectives. So keep the language as simple and direct as much as possible. I think I will skip this, otherwise I would not have time to talk about ethical issue. So writing the discussion, to start with, there would be a topical sentence which you raise in the introduction, and they go on talking about your own results, comparing your results with other people in the whole world, which are doing same sort of work, okay? Don't compare your data with your classmates or your country, but all the countries in the world. I think this is important. Okay, I'll skip this. Acknowledgement is also important. Try to acknowledge people. And one thing is the most important, to acknowledge the sources of funding, okay? Because I used to serve in the panel of Research Grant Council in Hong Kong and sometimes in China. So they will look at the results, the papers you publish, the students you train, whether you have collaboration generated from the study, and you ought to cite, ought to acknowledge the funding source, the organization, and also code number. This is very important. References, try to avoid personal communication, publication in doubt, and especially those papers written by the green groups. I think sometimes they can be very biased. Try to omit this. Also, unpublished data and submitted manuscripts which are not yet accepted. Well, if you want to do that, you might as well submit the copy of this particular manuscript you cited. Outdated papers and citing articles published only in the local language. So I think this is important, but if you have 100 references, maybe 3 or 4 published in Chinese or Indian or other language is acceptable, but not too many. And excessive self-citation and journal self-citation, I think this is important because a lot of journals are trying to increase the citation, having the journal citation. If we have time, I'll tell you a story later on. Reference style, skip it. Supplementary materials. English editing is important. Now, English is not my native language. I'm sure you have learned it by now. But we do have a bit of funds from the university and try to improve the English before your submission. I think this is kind of investment. I think it's worth investing on this because it will tap into your future career. So very careful, a careful manuscript preparation can prevent early rejection. I think this is very important. Try to show you some silly mistakes. I'm talking about silly mistakes. So in this particular sign, we have 4 silly mistakes, like bowling room should be bowling room, sauna bathroom should be sauna, guest should be guest, and then barber shop. What I'm trying to convey this message is try to be careful. Try to be careful in the words, spell checks, and recently I've been using this program called Grammarly. I find it useful, so I've been using it quite a lot. Choosing journals. I think one thing is very important. Try to look at the scope of each journal, because each journal, they have their own emphasis. Now for EGAH, I think we emphasize a bit more on the geochemical cycles of these elements which are related to ecological health and human health, okay, for the EGAH. People tend to look at the impact factor, journal ranking, and so on. I don't have time talking about this. Cover letter would be important. Now, not to write a long letter, because all these editors, they don't want to read long letters, maybe half a page. Try to look at the significance findings of your paper and how you can persuade them to accept the paper sending out for review. Suggest reviewers. Certain journals will ask you to do that. You can suggest some reviewers. They may or may not choose them in the end. But nowadays, it's really difficult to find reviewers who will do the job. I'm sure Michael and other people, maybe Oliver, will understand this. It's really difficult to ask people to serve as reviewers. Reviewing process will be very often oops, this is my alarm clock. So I got about a few more minutes. Recommendation will be reject without review, except with minor major revision, reject after review, and then not suitable, but will be reconsidered after you have carried out major revision. So one thing is very important. Try to look at all these comments made by the reviewers and try to address all the issues. And some of us are not so careful. They try to neglect certain questions, certain recommendations. I think this is really bad. So you should try to understand the meaning of the questions and then try to provide answers and try to indicate where and what changes have been made in the revised manuscript. I think this is important. And then submit the paper within the deadline specified. Very often, if you don't have enough time and you write and request a longer, and usually the editors will say yes, 2 or 3 weeks and even 1 month more. So submission milestones, dealing with editors. Now, if you are invited to revise and resubmit, I think we have mentioned, try to understand all the questions, try to address and try to act accordingly, solving the problems. If your paper was rejected with invitation to resubmit, I think you need to sit back and look at all the questions, whether you want to spend some time, a few months to repeat some of the experiments or to start another experiment. You need to decide whether you want to do that or you want to submit to another journal. If your paper was rejected with apparent reason, don't take it so personally. I have this a lot, especially in the early days. I mean, in the early days, I felt very upset and didn't feel active for a few days. But I think this is the fact. You have to sit back and look at the reasons. Well, accepting rejection, as I mentioned, do not take it personally. Even the Nobel laureates, they got rejected. So you need then to decide whether you want to submit to another journal and which journal. Now, a few minutes about ethical issues. I think this is very important. To start with multiple submission, this is bad. And nowadays, we can find out easily, especially all the journals from the same publisher, from Springer, Nature, we found out so easily. And once we found out, we'll put these authors into a blacklist. And then I will inform the journal assistants and my own assistant saying, well, if you see these names, throw them in baskets. We don't have to spend time doing this. So this is important, multiple submission. Plagiarism, I'm sure you know about plagiarism, data fabrication and falsification. I'm very surprised even some established professors are doing this. Not too many, a few cases in the past few years. I'm sure they will end up having problems in their job. They may lose their job, reputation, and so on. So be very careful when you start. You have to bear this in mind, not to do all this sort of activities. Redundant publication is also an issue. I think I ought to stop here now. I think I've spent about 50 minutes. Back to you, Mike.
We have time if you'd like to finish off.
Oh, we finished.
Another 5 minutes, or we can go into questions.
Okay, you can ask me questions. I will be very happy and interact with the audience, with the all the participants, Mike.
Wonderful. Many thanks for presentation. I'm learning as well here. There's
Really?
always an opportunity to learn, isn't there? Particularly from vast experience. So we're all very fortunate to have had 2 lectures now on how to write papers. It's a very privileged position. It's something I've never had before. I wish I'd have known this sort of 20 or more years ago. It would have been a big help to have lectures like these. Does anyone want to offer any questions? You can either put your hand up or in the chat box. If you can use the hand icon, that will indicate that you'd like to ask a question. Felicia Ajayi, if you can unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear you. Good morning.
Go on.
Hello. Okay. Thank you so much, Professor, for the lecture. Very enlightening. I would like to ask that if you can enlighten us and let us know reasons that could be behind or the reasons why somebody will submit a paper to a journal and to just be rejected outrightly. No reason given, no comment. The editor will just write back, I've seen this your letter, I've seen this your manuscript. I'm very sorry, I'm going to reject it. What could be the reason for that? Maybe if you are enlightened, if you know somebody might be on the lookout to prevent or not to include some things that could cause that. And then I would love to know also the average time frame during which one should expect a submitted manuscript that is undergoing review, an average time lapse that is supposed to take before you are contacted again that, okay, your paper has been reviewed, this is the next step. Because when you submit, probably if there is a need for you to do some corrections, you'll be told, and then you'll be given a time frame within which to effect the corrections and return the manuscript. But when you now submit and it has been accepted for review, you just wait on end. No time frame given during which you are to be on the lookout or expect the editorial body to get back to you. So I would love to know if there are your responses to these questions. Thank you.
Too many questions. I need some help, Mike.
So the first question was, what might be the reasons behind an editor rejecting a paper without any comments?
Oh, okay. Now, to start with, we do have this sort of reject without review. Okay. Now, every time we have papers coming in, and I think we reject about 50% of the papers because there are maybe two major reasons with this reject without review. First of all, they may not within the scope of the journal, like the EGAH we have. As I mentioned, two major elements you should touch upon: the ecological health, about all these animals and plants, and human health. So if your paper is dealing with only measuring chemical, like heavy metals in the water, in the sediment, without related to ecological and human health, I think we will reject them without review. Now, it doesn't mean the papers are not up to standard. Maybe it's a good paper, but it's a wrong journal. So you need to find other journals. So don't take it so seriously, so personally, I think. Now, the second one may be the problems of the paper. Maybe it's some wrong formats. They are not up to certain criteria. According to the journal, you spend more time looking at the history of your work and so on. Well, the second one may be related to the standards. So these are the major reasons, but the first one would be more important.
I suppose it's worth reminding everyone that every journal has author guidelines, and you must follow those. Otherwise, the editor will simply reject it. If you've clearly not followed the author's guidelines, that's probably a clear message, isn't it? Read those first, and to make sure you have the correct format. The second question was, well, this will be a different answer, I guess, depending on the journal. What should the average time be for a paper submission to acceptance?
Oh, I think it varies. As I mentioned, nowadays it's really difficult to find dedicated reviewers who work on your, or even associate editors. We have associate editors. A lot of them, they are very enthusiastic in the first 2 or 3 years. And then afterwards, their activities sort of decline quite a bit. So they may slow down the reviewing process. But we keep on tracking on these papers. If they are taking too long for review, I think we will try to shorten the reviewing process. It's difficult, but the ideal time would be about 50 days, I think.
Okay, great, thank you. We've got 2 hands up. I've just had a question on the chat room from Moses, so how are editors dealing with some reviewers that are not happy with their life and just fault finders? All they do is just condemn the work of others, probably because of race, personal beef, competitors, etc.
I don't get the question. I'm sorry.
Well, how do editors deal with reviewers that are maybe just negative in their perspective?
Oh, yes. Now, it's funny. I also sent out papers with my postdoc fellows, research assistants, and we found that, well, not to our journal, not to EGH. And funny enough, throughout so many years, I only published a few papers in EGH, and all the papers are published in other journals. And I find out a lot of these reviewers are becoming a bit strange. Some of them, they want to justify their existence. They accept all the duties, but they don't do a good job. They would not do a thorough evaluation. All they do is to write something very superficial, saying, this is not a good paper, it should be rejected. This paper is something you should write it in another way and full of problems and so on, without really pointing out the problems, without giving any constructive comments. So we find some of these reviewers, I'm sorry, but it's difficult because nowadays you have too many journals in the market, I think.
Yeah, it's the job of the associate editors and the editors-in-chief to manage the reviewers, isn't it? And many reviewers for some journals will have maybe a scoring system against them, perhaps. Or often now reviews are published, publons. So people have more accountability perhaps for writing reviews about papers, so they must be much more evidential.
Yeah. And that's why we have to rotate the members of associate editors. If they are not performed, we will try to replace them in 2 or 3 years. I think this is a general practice, not only for EGAH, but also for other journals.
Yeah, okay. We've got a question from Adipo Asano.
Thank you so much, Professor Ming, for your elaborate presentation.
Thank you.
This may not be quite a question, but maybe a comment that a publication has so many tasks in it, so many things to do. I find that many of us or many people combine all in one and try to handle everything and then hope that everything is right. And in my opinion, I think the scientific aspect comes first. Once the scientific aspect has been satisfied, then there are a number of things that the authors or the early career fellows need to look into in a publication so as not to annoy a reviewer. Like, I think we should set something like a checklist. And then you have, say, references separate from, then you look at the English grammar and structure of all the sentences. Some mistakes are very difficult for a reviewer to forgive, especially when they repeat themselves. They're very simple English construction, which are not really a reflection of inability of the author, but more or less a reflection of carelessness, because you find some sentences written correctly and others just left hanging. A sentence that is not complete, full, the way a structure of a sentence should be. Then the spellings, then there are a number of issues like, say, putting the right bracket around the reference, placing the punctuation marks in the right place. I was thinking that when the scientific aspect has been addressed, then a person should set up his own checklist that he finds comfortable, but not combine all the tasks in one and hope that everything will be right. I don't think it will be right for anybody. Everybody separates the tasks so that you look at the references separately at a separate time. You look at the words, the grammar and so on of all the sentences separately. And then you take time to look at the figures separately. And then there are some things like fonts. You have different fonts, different pages. Sometimes it's a little annoying to a reviewer when such carelessness is shown in the publication. Maybe it's a comment or a question.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, thank you. I think it's most important to observe all the guidelines and about formats, about the sections you are asked to include when you submit to a journal. I have seen papers, they have been submitted to a journal and rejected, and they don't even change the format with previous comments on the paper and then submit to your journal. And it's really annoying with all these activities, right? I think you have to at least look at the guidelines, change the formats and have a new version before you submit. I think I need Mike for other questions, right?
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what the specific question in there was. It's more of a commentary, wasn't it? Yeah. Are you okay, Odipo, if we move on to the next person? Does that satisfy what you're asking?
It's a comment.
That's more of a comment
Yes,
than a question.
I'm fine. It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have quite a few questions in the chat box. We'll try and get to them. We have Mariam with her hand up, please.
Mariam. Who is Mariam?
Thank you, Prof, for the beautiful lecture. My question is this. I have somebody that submitted a manuscript for publication since April. And up to this moment, there has been no response from the editor. That person that I'm talking about has sent series of messages to the editor to ask for the status of the manuscript. And up to this moment, there has been no response from the editor. So would one be able to say that the editor is not capable, or is it better to ask for the withdrawal of the manuscript, or what do you advise in a situation like that?
I don't quite get the question, Mike.
Okay. Yeah. Mariam was asking about a paper submitted in April, and really what should she do if she has not heard anything from the journal? Should she request that she withdraws the paper, ask for a different editor or so on?
I think it happens sometimes. I think what you ought to do is drop them a short message about what happened to the paper I submitted in April. I'm sure they will answer your message. I usually
yes.
do.
They've not replied any of the messages.
Oh, they don't reply. Oh,
no.
Not EGAH, I hope.
Could I suggest something? One of the common problems we've had in setting up this workshop is dealing with names and emails. Many of you change your names around, the order of your names, and that's common for colleagues that we work with in Africa. You also, many of you have provided different emails, so you'll log in with one email address and use another. Quite often there's a spelling mistake in the email. So Gmail will be missing a G, for example. So you may want to check that you have the correct contact details with that journal. They may be trying to contact you and it's not coming through to you, or it's going to your junk mail. One other thing to consider is that editors and reviewers do this as a voluntary effort in their spare time, and they're generally very busy people. They may also lose the emails in their junk mail and therefore don't see the notifications, but the journals work very hard to send reminders. And so you may want to think about your contact details, but otherwise contact the journal. Mohammed Chahimi has some.
Thank you.
Okay, Mohammed, do you want to? So you're going to follow up on that comment, I guess.
Yes, Michael. There are a few reasons, but for example, it happened to me that we invited up to 30 reviewers to review, but we have never had the either they declined or they have never answered. They have never replied to the invitation. So sometimes it gets difficult, and as editor or editorial office, we should write to the authors to tell them that we have difficulty finding reviewers. But if there is nothing that comes from the journal, no answer, this is not acceptable. I think we editors, we should take care about because the authors, they trust us, they submit their work, and they want their papers to be handled within a short period of time. So I think in that case, if the author does not receive an answer from the editorial office, I think the best way to go is to submit to another journal and decline, maybe withdraw the paper by sending a message to the editorial office and the editor. Because if you wait 6 months, maybe in the 6 months that have passed, similar studies have been submitted and probably published, and you have to go through the updating. Professor have talked about the up-to-date references, up-to-date studies. So you have to redo the literature survey again to track any new publication in the domains. So this is important that we editors should take care about the submitted papers and to accelerate processing the paper. Thank you.
I'm 100% agree with you, Mohammed. I always feel so guilty when I see papers stuck in the system for a few months without doing anything. And we often, if we cannot find any suitable reviewers, we will do two things. One is to ask the authors to give us some potential reviewers. And then we look at them and try to find those which are less relevant to the authors, and then ask them to do a quick review. Or we ask some friends, some colleagues in different university, and twist their arms and say, I need to do some, I need you to do the work within a week, and ask them to do it. So
yes,
speed up the process. Yes. I'm sure you.
Yes, it also happened to me, and believe me, the friends are quite critical because they want their friends to get their papers published, but in a very decent shape, a very good paper. So friends sometimes are very critical, and they raise a lot of comments to improve the general quality of the papers. But maybe it is not very ethical to call upon friends, but what can we do? I mean, we editors, we are left with nobody to review the paper, and this is, I mean, authors should know who are not in the scientific edition. I want them also to be aware of our situation when we are facing zero reviewer who agree to review. Thank you.
That's the reason I do not have too many friends now.
Wonderful discussion. And of course, you ask the associate editors to do the reviews as well, don't you? As a last stop.
Right.
We're just running slightly over, so I'll offer one more question to Belinda Kaninga with her hand up. I have made note of other questions in the chat box, and if that's okay with Mohammed and Ming, I'll forward the questions to you, and if you could answer them, and we'll circulate back to the group. There are about five or six questions. They keep coming.
Okay.
Great. You've both created a lot of interest here.
Can I check them in the email? I can answer them through email, right?
Yes, please.
Okay, good.
Thank you. We'll just go for one last question from. Sorry, Mohammed, you were about to say something.
Yes, but maybe they should be gathered by you, the questions, and send them to us, and then you recirculate the answers.
Yes, I've done that. I've copied them into a Word document. Okay. Belinda, if you want to ask your question, congratulations to Belinda. She passed her PhD 2 or 3 weeks ago. Well done, Dr. Belinda Kalinga. There you go, Belinda.
Thank you, Michael.
Let's see your face, the face of a new PhD holder.
Dr. Belinda.
Okay, when I brush my hair, I'll bring my photo. Okay, thanks, Professor Wong, for a very elaborate lecture. I'd like to find out from you as an editor, what do you do when you get two contrasting review recommendations from reviewers? Say one says it's good enough, it can be published, it just needs a little polishing. The other one just says, no, reject, it's not good enough. What do you do as an editor?
Yes, good question. We very often have this. One say yes and one say no. So we need to look at the comments more carefully, and then you have to make your own judgment, really. But to be safe, very often we will ask an additional reviewer to make comments. So it's difficult to tell you the standard answer. I think you have to deal with each case. Whether the negative comments are really sort of comments, whereas the positive comments are cosmetic comments saying this is a good paper, it should be accepted and so on. I think you really need to look at the contents and also the comments. Right, Mohammed? Mike?
Excuse me? Hello?
Huh?
Do you want to add anything, Mohammed?
Sorry, about what? I was disrupted.
Oh.
Okay, no problem. I think, Belinda, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Many thanks. This is very, very nice discussion. I have copied across 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's another 7 questions. So I'm sure if you want to add any more to the chat box, I will copy them across and we'll ask.
And send them through email, Mike.
Yes. So we'll be very lucky to get answers from 2 very experienced editors-in-chief. So there's lots of information we can pull together here. So what I suggest is that we have a tea and coffee break. Ming, thank you very much for your lecture this morning. Very insightful, and I'm sure we've all learned a lot this morning. I'm sure you probably want to leave the meeting now, as it's quite late in the evening for you.
Yeah, my wife is calling me. My wife is calling me. Time for dinner.
We can't keep you from your dinner. You're very welcome to stay, but again, if you mustn't miss your dinner.
Okay.
And many thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for giving me this chance. I fully enjoyed the presentation and also discussion, and most important of all, meeting you guys first time meeting you online and also participants. So hopefully in the future, we will meet again.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Thanks.
Okay,
Thank you, Prof.
you. I'm leaving now.
Thank you. So for everyone else, if you want to get a cup of tea or a coffee and return in 10 minutes, and then Professors Asano and Olatunji will lead the breakout groups. Okay. So we'll see you at 10:30 UK time. Well, we'll give you 10 minutes, okay, from now. All right, see you shortly. Yeah. And then just before lunch, I'll go through how
can we just have it?
Sorry? Just before lunch, I'll go through how we can, how everyone can access.
Summary of this last time.
I'll go through how everyone can access the Environmental Geochemistry and Health journal with their membership. So we'll explain that because we needed to fit that in sometime this morning.
Okay.
So we've got other things.
Quickly.
Sorry.
There seems to be some lag. You said what?
So we will finish for lunch earlier. So we'll shift the day slightly so we can finish earlier in the afternoon. So we had some spare time. What I will do is just before lunch explain how everyone can access the Environmental Geochemistry and Health journal using their SCGH membership that they all have now.
Okay.
So we will give them some examples of papers in the after lunch, and they can go and find more papers from that journal through their online access.
Okay.
Okay. So if we return at, say, should we say 11:15? So in 35 minutes, and then we'll have some feedback.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, maybe can we spend the next 4 minutes to look at the a few slides of what we did the last time, just to refresh our memories.
Yes, that would be useful. If you can remind people.
Let me quickly do that. Okay, I think I have that here. Just kind of an edit of the slide we used the last time to actually have a look. Can we see?
No, we cannot see it.
Apparently the network.
Do you want me to share it?
Actually, I did some additional editing, so I think it's a network.
Do you want me to share the slides? And then I think Adipo, you might need to take over. I think Aki's gone. He's frozen.
Oh.
So
So maybe you could share your slide, please.
Yeah, I'll knock him off, and then perhaps you can go through. So we had these summary points. You can remind everyone.
Yeah, this slides is just a reminder of what we did last time. In case some of us forgot. So we will repeat the same, but with improved blogs. And we hope that at the end of the day, everything will be very well. Look, if you look at the charts, I've put a link to your improved blogs, and we requested that you rejoin the group that you had last time. I think we're going to have a problem with only one group where the leader may not have arrived yet. I don't know whether Christian has come.
We'll have
If he
to
hasn't
spread
come,
Christian's group. We'll have to spread
then we'll
Christian's
have to
group
share the members of the group. Yes, yeah. We'll have to spread the members of
across
the group.
everyone else.
Yeah.
So just
So
remember. Go on.
the exercise will be what makes a good blog, research paper, or a report. Clear impact you want to create with the audience, the structure of the paper. I think I may not have to read through every line, but
No.
generally this is what we want to do in the next few minutes. What captures the interest of your peers, and then we summarize the guiding principles.
Yeah. So it would be useful for everyone to reflect on their experience of writing with those guiding principles. Yeah. Are we seeing improvement? So what would be useful to know is this peer review with each of you, is it a useful thing? Are you learning something about it? That'd be good to know. So the questions in the chat box, if we can, but bearing in mind the bullet points here for how you put together your guiding principles. Is that clear? Is that okay? We'll say yes. Right, shall we go to the groups then? So the people leading the groups, do you understand?
So I request Andrea to put us in our rooms.
Andrea, are you okay with that? Yeah. Olivier. Yeah. Mohammed. Good. Okay. And hopefully we have Aki coming back. Deepo, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Sophia, you've just asked which room should you join. Just choose one. Do people know which group they're in? They were in before. Andrea?
Hello, Michael. Hello, Michael.
Ivy, hello.
Yes, I didn't attend this session of group. So which group should I join?
Just pick one. Anyone you like. Go for Mohammed's if you like.
Okay.
As the experienced editor-in-chief. There you go.
Okay, sorry about that. My system got frozen, so I had to restart. I'm joining now from the phone.
Okay. No problem. We're just about to go into the groups. So are you able to lead people through talking about the blogs?
I should be able to do that.
Okay. So remember, we're trying to get feedback on the process of peer review. Does everyone understand how this can help with their learning using those guiding principles they pulled together last time?
Mm-hmm.
It's in the chat box.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I was out for a while. I saw that the breakout session has been activated. Are people moved into their groups now?
They are. Whilst you were away, we were just reminding them of the guiding principles until you came back.
It's okay. So please go ahead.
So they are now going to their rooms.
Great. Okay.
Right, it says
if you are not assigned to a group, just choose one. I can see a few of you asking which group. Or we will just do that ourselves. Okay, so.
I don't think they can choose one, Michael. I might have to shut them. I think I set it up that we would assign them, so I might have to shut them and set it up again that they can join a group.
Okay, we'll assign them then. Don't worry, we'll assign them.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
By assigning the group coordinator, or I'll put them in the group.
I don't know which groups they're going to. That's the problem, Andrea.
Um.
Difficult to help you.
I'll send.
Somebody has the kids in the background.
We have a lot of mothers in the house.
Hello, Michael.
Hello.
I can't get into any group from my end.
Okay.
Can someone help assign me?
Yeah, please be patient. We're trying to put you in the rooms.
Michael, I think I'm going to shut it down and then reopen it so they can join themselves.
Okay, all right. Are they coming back?
That's not working.
You have so much noise in your background.
Really?
So, Andrea, you've brought everyone back, yeah?
It's doing a countdown at the moment.
Okay, 17. Okay. Can we not speed that up?
Can't see how to.
It's a good thing we have plenty of time this morning.
I can't just explain that I go frozen out by the system. Sorry.
So they're still coming back, yeah? Yeah, we're still waiting. Sorry, everyone, a few technical problems. We'll allow you to go into your own rooms. Do you know, the thing is, do they know their own rooms? Perhaps if you can you post that list on the chat box, Andrea, then they know which room to go to. So, group 3, you haven't got your group coordinator here this morning, Christian. So group 3, just choose another one to go to.
Options. Okay, everyone should be able to choose a room now.
Okay, do they know which room to go to?
I'm just about to put it on the chat.
Okay.
But I don't know how.
Right, let's try. Okay, I've just put group 1 in. I don't know if you can read that text.
Group 1.
Group 1. So it's going to be difficult to read because of the text conversion from Excel.
Can you share your screen, Michael? Would that be better?
Yeah, okay, probably. Right, here you go. Here are the names. Can you, hopefully you can all go to your rooms. You can, we'll help you go there, but if you can start going into your rooms, remember group 3, Christian is not here, so if just choose another room to go to. In fact, what I'll probably do is send you. God's sakes. Some of the names are different. So we're sending, so group 7 is Mohammed, isn't it?
So this, we will work on the blogs now, the 500 words blog.
Yes, so they have revised them and